Welcome to Transformation Talks, your guide to navigating complex change. Each episode brings you expert insights, practical strategies, and real-world stories on delivering impactful transformation. From managing technology rollouts to driving cultural shifts, we'll help you tackle the challenges of change and build lasting success. I'm Hayley Saich, Head of Marketing for one of the UK's leading management consultancies, and for the next 30 minutes, your podcast host. In today's episode, we welcome Redwan Begh, a Project One transformer for the last 10 years, and he will be sharing his experience in how to tackle the complex landscape of cybersecurity, highlighting the impact cyber attacks can have and how organisations can avoid it. Let's dive in. Welcome to Transformation Talks.
Thank you, Hayley, and thank you for having me here today. Delighted to be here.
It's great to have you, and it's brilliant actually because we've worked together for 10 years.
I don't know where it's gone.
I know, we still look as youthful.
Of course.
So we're going to talk about quite a trend really. It's on everybody's lips, cyber security, and it's a huge topic, isn't it? A huge topic and quite complex. But we wanted to dig a little bit deeper to help our listeners understand the impact of cyber attacks on, huge organisations and how you and the team are helping organisations to address it. Yeah,
thank you, Hayley. It's been my life full on in this space for the last 18 or so months. You said it's been 10 years with Project One. And it's been 10 years of leading big, complex change. And in that sense, cyber's an area of change that a lot of our customers are trying to adjust to. And therefore, the principles of what we do and how we do it were very applicable here. In terms of the harsh reality of cyber and the risk that it brings, it's very real. It can impact any of us regardless of our age, our demographic, what we do, where we live, because we all deal with technology in different shapes or forms, whether it's as an individual, your iPhone, your car, the home office, at home, any devices connected to the internet, they're all at risk.
Yeah, it can be scary, can't it? And so organisations have got a big responsibility, haven't they, to make sure that they are secure.
That's right. And that's us as individuals. And then there's this whole world of the workplace. And they themselves have got to be geared up to deal with this risk. And for them, it's also very real. Whether it's a company that delivers services, operations, or even manufacturing in that environment. We've seen some really big, scary stories out in the public where there have been some really good lessons learned and case studies out there for people to go and look at. But when we think about some of the work that we do and the customers that we come into contact with, there's a real risk that they face of hackers getting in and taking over some of their technology that controls, for instance, their operations, whether that's a production line with a company that's manufacturing drugs where there needs to be precision, or water treatment plants, and the risk of water sewage being dumped out into rivers, for instance, from a hacker. Through to in defence, we've got unmanned aircraft and vehicles. What if a hacker takes on those systems and gets in? What happens in a real life operation? There are so many different angles here, and it's all very real. And this is what keeps a lot of executives up at night, especially ones that are the chief information security officers, the operation directors. It's a big part of their thinking.
Yeah, and just talking about those things, it's probably not something everyday people would think about, and that cyber attack could have an impact on things like the water sewage works, and obviously the defence of the country is super critical, and that brings that concern to people who are in charge of keeping it secure, doesn't it? And so
exactly,
how are organisations addressing the issue of cyber security, and what do they need to consider?
So there are a number of things that we're seeing. In a lot of instances, the regulators have stepped in, who have a responsibility across the industry, whichever industry you're in, and they'll give a point of view of this is what we expect to see. And if we do these things and do them well across the industry, across the supply chain, things will be more secure. And with that, for example, we're seeing a shift away from historically what we've known as accreditation, which is hey, I've got a piece of paper here that says I'm cyber compliant. They've woken up to the fact that the landscape has changed massively over the last decade, and having an accreditation doesn't necessarily prevent a hacker or anyone who's malicious from getting in and doing what they want to do. Secure by design is a theme that we've seen across a number of industries, whether it's financial services, public sector, pharma, and that's pushing good practice and a number of priorities. And also through the regulators, that's really challenged the players across the industry to up their game and build in protection. When we then look closer to what the companies are doing across the industries, cyber standards is massive. So depending on which part of the world you're in, which industry, what your customer expectations are, ultimately there are some common languages around cyber standards, and therefore they give clarity on what's to be expected in different areas, the different kind of controls that you can put in place, and therefore it builds up a level of operation that's stronger, more resilient and more compliant. And we're seeing a lot of companies taking those standards, trying to interpret what they mean, and then putting that in place into day-to-day practice. And that can be standards in relation to information technology, or going back to the earlier examples where there are operations in place, operational technology. So the technology that's there to control anything to do with manufacturing, for instance. So companies are looking to build in a lot of good practice.
And do you think that could be quite daunting for organisations? I guess there's new cyber intelligence from the hackers every day, isn't there? I know just from a normal person day to day, you're constantly getting something new on your phone, and is this a scam? And so it must be quite daunting for people in charge of this.
Of course. Going back to what we talked about around executives being stressed around the impact of an attack, a lot of them are also nervous around, well, where's it going to come from next? Where could it come from? And that's one of the things that keeps them awake at night. I think by having some of these standards and being confident that their teams are working to them and working to them to a really good level gives them some confidence as well. Putting them in place isn't always straightforward if it's a new thing or there are changes to existing standards. There needs to be an adjustment, and with that adjustment there's usually a bit of disruption, a bit of an uncomfortable period to get that right, and that's the nature of change as we know and love in what we do with Project One. Yeah,
and I guess we talked a lot about that in previous podcasts of change management. It's all about making sure that people are on the journey and understanding why they're doing what they're doing.
That's right, Hayley. So there are some other things that I probably want to point out as well around what companies are doing. So they're getting a lot more tuned into something called risk and risk management. So they'll want to be proactive and understand where the risk is coming from and try and plan for that and get the right tooling, the right people around the room to participate in understanding what are the risks. The landscape changes all the time. Malicious activity can come in all shapes and forms, and it's building a picture of what that is, where it could come from, and therefore getting a view of, if we've got a finite amount of resource across the company, how do we prioritise that?
Yeah.
Along with that, a lot of companies are focused on something called assurance. So we talked about having standards and good practice, but how can you prove that that's being done to a really good level? We need to be able to assure that and give the evidence. And that's a big part of secure by design as we're seeing it. And also, if I'm paying for a service and someone in the industry is delivering something, I'll want to know that they're cyber compliant, they're working to good standards. And the best way to get that confidence is to know that they're assuring what they do. They're building up a bank of evidence, and it's there should anyone want to go in and look at it. Other things that we've seen as well, building up capability in cyber operations. knowing what a good slick operation looks like, ranging from understanding what the threats are, allocating the resources, through to, if there is an incident, how do we manage that? Are the right processes and protocols in place? What information flows from where to help manage that? How do any service providers who work with the organisation participate in that? And that then brings on a whole world of, what do we do about our supply chain? So if I'm a manufacturer, for instance, and I've got providers sending in complex plans or delivering goods that need to be connected to the internet, how do I know that they're secure and that we don't have any leakages or breaches from other parts of the supply chain? So a lot of companies now are working very closely and very tightly with their supply chain as well.
Wow. So it's a real kind of web, isn't it?
There are a lot of moving parts, and the softer side of things as well, when we think about it, this is new to a lot of people, or it has been, and therefore there's the whole, what does it mean for people? I think a really good way of looking at it is, just because I sit in security or I have a team in security doesn't mean the buck stops with me. Everyone has a role to play, and therefore that means a bit of a cultural shift. You want all the employees across the organisation who have devices, who access technology in different ways, to understand what their role and responsibility is around this, and that they've got to behave accordingly to keep the risk and the threats out. That means education, awareness, all the way down to simple things like clips and videos for people to watch to understand and be alert if they see anything suspicious, what to do.
And I'm sure that probably resonates with everyone listening to this, because every workplace will send out communications of, make sure you're up to date with all your updates on your phone.
Right, exactly.
You've got all the antivirus software.
Exactly. Or the occasional curveball or test that's thrown when you get an email and you're thinking, is this right?
Yeah.
What do I do with it?
Yeah.
Should I be clicking on the link in it?
If you have a little niggle, or the email address is a bit strange. Right. Yeah, it's one example of what can happen just day to day.
Exactly.
But there's a lot more that goes behind it. And obviously with huge organisations, there's a lot of moving parts and a lot to think about.
There are. The other one that does come to mind is all those things that we've just gone through around understanding the risk, how to assure and build that evidence to give confidence, getting the right cyber operations in place, managing that supply chain and getting it nice and secure, that cultural awareness, the education that comes with that. When we wrap all of that up together, there's something called governance that a lot of organisations have invested in heavily as well. And that's essentially understanding how well are we doing against all of the above. What information do we need to generate to evidence that and prove that? Who are the accountable people in the organisation, and how do we get them together to ensure that we're doing the right things, moving in the right direction, so we stay on top of things, whether it's the standards, managing incidents, looking at the future landscape and risk profiling. So if you wrap that up with good governance, that's going to help as well. And these are just some of the things that we're seeing out there.
So there's a real checklist there for senior leaders in charge of this, which I'm sure, they're all very much on top of. But if you are just starting out in this area and you're thinking, okay, what do I really need to tick off the list? We had a number of things that you touched on there, didn't we?
That's right. And walking in the shoes of senior leaders, or having worked very closely with them who are trying to tackle these challenges, I'd say there are a few nuggets to take from that. So if you're a senior leader who's working in this place or is just starting to focus on this challenge, some of the priorities that we've seen them tackle and work with them on, I think one of them is just being really clear on what the case for change is, what the business case is, and securing the right level of investment to help protect the organisation. There's always the challenge of understanding what's the doomsday scenario. If we get a really bad breach as an organisation, what could that mean? What could that mean from a disruption point of view, from a financial point of view, what could it cost us? What does that mean for our reputation? If we're hacked, does that dent confidence, impact share prices? Does it attract fines as well as financial losses if a hacker comes in and takes away funds, for instance? So there's a whole piece there around senior leaders building the right business case to balance out that risk versus what do we need to invest to manage it. And then that's also down to a senior leader understanding and being really clear on their vision. Do they want an organisation that manages things proactively and therefore bringing extra protection? Do they want to detect these events nice and early and get prepared in the right way? There's a lot to think about there. And in doing so, that then has a knock-on effect on, well, what kind of an organisation do I need to put in place? What's the skill, the capability, the technology that we need to invest in? And then on the wider side of things, one senior leader can't do it by themselves. They need to get out and influence and bring their peers along with them. So they may sit in an IT or an IM&T function, but they may need to go and talk to senior leaders who deliver services and have teams, senior leaders who look after operations, senior leaders who look after manufacturing, and bring them along as well, because everyone's got their part to play. And to do that, that requires organisation and getting the right skills and the resources in place to make that happen. And once they're clear on their expectations there, they can then, as seniors, plan accordingly.
Yeah, there's a strong argument there around we'd rather be prepared than dealing with a breach.
Of course.
And so all of those points there and those nuggets that you've shared,
yeah,
that it's really important that that's taken care of in that business case.
I think so. It's about providing that environment for everyone to succeed and be safe. And that can be the education, the tooling, getting the flow of information around what the risks are, what the threats are, and having openness and dialogue on a regular basis as well across the organisation. So there's a lot for senior leaders to prioritise and work through there.
Yeah. And there's been experience, I know, from the Project One team in many different sectors and how they approach this, but irrelevant of the sector, these nuggets are all the same, aren't they? It's all about being prepared.
Looking across the different industries that we work in, there are some common themes for sure. And I think as Project One, something that we're outstanding at and we have a track record around doing is understanding, well, what's the change here? What are the senior leaders looking to put in place, and how is that different to what they do today or have done historically? And it takes them into uncharted territory. And to do that, we've been working with them to understand what that change is and shape it, design it. What does the organisation look like? What's the technology that's needed? If they want to have a proactive approach towards risk, how do they do that? What are the right processes? What tooling do they need in place? When it comes to doing things such as implementing standards, how is that broken down? Which parts of which teams look after which standards? Do they understand what technology is out there that's exposed or at risk?
For some companies, this is new. So how are companies going about getting this right?
Yeah, you're right, Hayley. For some companies, this is new territory. For others, it's about maturity. They're already there, but they know that they need to prioritise and focus on other areas to get the maturity right and the standards correct. And therefore it's about accelerating their development. I think where we've worked with customers, very much a case of we need help here, whether it's we're not so sure if we're doing things correctly in the assurance space, how do we go about that? Or we've got tens of thousands of systems out there, where do we start? It's very much back to the fundamentals around, okay, if there's a journey of change here, what is it? And what's the best way to navigate that? So if we follow the logic there, in the first instance, what we see is it's about shaping that change. What's the case for the change? And therefore, what are your priorities? What's the vision here? To be cyber secure, protected and safe. And therefore, what's the business case that comes with that? whether it's the financial side, the risk of reputation, what resources are needed. And from that, we've worked with our customers to define what their target state is. So what does their cyber organisation look like? But also, what does the wider organisation look like in terms of what it contributes to the cyber agenda, how it helps? And when we're clear on that target state, what are the roles, what are the responsibilities, what does the organisation look like, what's the skill profile, what kind of technology is needed, what are the flows of information, for instance, what does good governance look like? There are a whole heap of things there to think about into that target state. But then in the territory of building the roadmap, because this doesn't happen overnight, yeah? Or if it's about maturity in how do we assure, because we've got tens of thousands of systems out there, some of them are information technology, others operational technology. How do we do that? It's about building that roadmap and therefore breaking it down into bite-sized chunks that don't feel overwhelming and are therefore manageable. And manageable from the point of view of it's clear on who needs to do what their contribution is, and how we build the responsibility that people take on going forward in bite-sized chunks as well. And from that roadmap, we then want to look to work with customers to deliver that. And ideally, it's customers who are going to live and breathe it in future that take on the responsibility as well. So therefore, they're involved from day one, and they get up to speed as we go along. And as a part of that, we're talking program management, the governance around the PMO, and because a lot of this is around cultural change, enabling people, creating that environment for success, providing the right skills, capabilities, there's a good amount of change management and business change that needs to take place as well. Put those ingredients together, and then you're on the journey to a successful program of getting from one place to another around being more cyber secure.
That's certainly a very constructive checklist, I think, there for senior leaders. It's a lot to think about, but like you say, it's not on one person's shoulders. It's a team effort. It
has to be. It has to be, absolutely. And everyone plays their part. They know what's expected of them and their teams. And when that comes together, it makes things a lot more manageable, feel more secure, and leaving companies feeling a bit more proactive and on the front foot.
Yeah, trying to make that complex a little bit more simple where you can.
That's the one, Hayley. That's the one.
So I know that obviously, as we said before, we've worked together for 10 years here at Project One.
Yeah.
And your career started before that as well.
Yeah.
And what I like to ask for our listeners is for that expert advice that they won't get anywhere else. From your experience in your career, if you were to look back when you started, what you know now, what you didn't know then, what advice would you give to our listeners that you've learned over the years?
Oh, that's a good question, Hayley. For me, it's about getting a feel for what you enjoy the most and what you're good at, and getting really good at it and doing lots of it and getting the most out of it. And I think if you can do that, you get involved in things that make you happy and you're contributing more.
And work doesn't feel like work because you enjoy what you do.
Exactly.
Good advice.
So yeah, do what you enjoy and do lots of it. And I think you'll find over time you just get better and better at it as well, and you learn more. And you can hopefully impart more to others as well who are interested in it or who need your help.
Yeah. It's like the Matthew Saich 10,000 hours of practice makes you an expert. And I think we've got a strong team of transformers here who have had more than 10,000 hours of experience.
That's right. Got the grey hairs to show as well, Hayley.
Well, I wasn't going to say anything. I've tried to hide mine.
Yeah, I'm failing.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of your insight of what you've learned over the years, what you've been doing with customers in terms of addressing the complex challenge of cybersecurity and making sure that organisations and their customers are protected against it. It's been great to see you, so thank you so much.
Likewise, and thanks for having me on, Hayley.
See you soon.
Cheers. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Transformation Talks. We hope you found today's insights valuable in your journey to leading successful transformation. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe and share it with your network. Stay connected with us for more expert insight and stories on delivering complex change and transformation in any organisation. See you next time.